Oh, there's cat hair on my mic. Happy December 2nd. When I think of art, I think of shows, movies, books, podcasts. I think of anything that's been created by a human person, not an AI. This is the era where we watch whatever we want, however we want, and it is available in the blink of a second. And a lot of us, I think, use art as a way to numb ourselves and really get overwhelmed. I don't think it's really problematic to numb ourselves with art because the way that we're living and the systems that are surrounding us, the environment, the context of our environment is very, very difficult. So I came up with this. I think we have to start watching and reading and listening to things that people recommend. I think it's really, really hard, especially people that you are in relationship with, people in your community. That also helps us with being able to be in better relationship with each other. When someone recommends a book, a thing they have watched recently, don't take it too lightly. I know we don't want to be consuming exactly what the other person is consuming because obviously we all have our own preferences. But like once in a while, I think it is actually okay to get out of our comfort zone and read, listen, watch to the thing that someone, our beloved, have recommended. My sister, for instance, loves Donna Tartt. Donna Tartt's book is not really my speed. The genre is not like my type of reading. I avoided it for a while, but I realized how that lights her up whenever she talks about it. And I started reading Donna Tartt, The Secret History, and I was surprised to learn more about what my sister likes, but also understand my sister. But also it's very affirming to the other person. Wow, you really care enough. I have another friend who reads as much as I do, and if not more actually, and they recommended one or two books and I read it and they were so surprised. They were like, oh, you actually read what I recommend? And I was like, yeah. And I also have friends who love to listen to a lot of music that I don't really listen to. It's just not something that comes up. Preferences, although around music, are all over the place. It's sometimes, there's just an oversaturation of music, and so I would play it in like while we're together, or I go to a concert that they have been talking about for a while or something like that, and they're so surprised. And it kind of gave me like, oh, reading and listening to people's recommendation in your community would allow you to be understanding of each other, but also relationally, it's a very affirming and a strong indication of how much you respect that person, in my opinion. I love watching movies with people, and sometimes there's people in your life that may not want to watch it with you. Go to a movie theater near you. Local movie theater near me does a $5 movie every Tuesday. I make a date out of it because I know a lot of the people in my life are not movie watchers, film watchers. Whatever is playing, I usually go with not a lot of context about it. The thing about consuming art in a communal space and collectively with others, even if you don't talk to them, even if you don't know them, there's a certain humanness about that. It also allows you to be like, wow, that felt really, really good. It felt like it filled my cup, even though I didn't know the people that were there. I love going to the museum by myself and just kind of walking around and seeing and the same art that other people in my space are also seeing. I also like going to the museum with other people as well. I like listening to music with other people. Also sharing as much as possible the music that I consume, the podcast I listen to, the videos that I watch, because consuming collectively with other people, even though it takes them 3, 4, 1 year to get to that art, it feels a lot more intentional. In the era of where streaming services have become such a norm that you can YouTube anything, you can Google anything. I sound like such an old person, but like there was a time when you would watch very similar shows because the streaming services weren't a thing. And so on Mondays you come and you're like, oh my god, did you watch like this weekend's this show, this whatever? And even when I was a teenager, that was a thing. But now there's such an overload of content that you don't really have that collective consumption of art in the way that we had 10-15 years ago. Now everyone is in their own hyper niche spaces of consumption of art, which actually prevents us from enjoying things together and understanding each other, but also really further isolates us. The next one is like watching things randomly that are popular without really reading too much into it, or reading the synopsis or every review, every Twitter reaction. I used to be that person who would go on Twitter before I see something and I'm like, I want to know everything about it. Or like on Tumblr, when Tumblr was like big. Actually, what that did was it made up my mind. Human beings' brain, no matter how different, edgy you are, is very, very impressionable. And when it comes to art, that hasn't been the case. Many people experience art in a way that is a lot more coordinated. There wasn't a ton of outlets to talk about it. You maybe read something on the newspaper or like on a news thing on online, but there wasn't this many concentrated conversations and takes and hot takes about a piece of art, a piece of content. Sometimes I find myself, I'm like in the middle of a show or a series, or like I'm about to watch a movie and I go accidentally on Twitter, as you do, and I see like a bunch of people reacting to it, and then I go back to the show or the piece of art that I'm consuming, and I all of a sudden have very negative reactions to the thing that I was having positive reactions to prior. And that happens a lot even when I watch a lot of like queer shows, where a lot of the hyper niche communities I'm a part of would have conversations about and like the mutuals that I have would talk about it, and they're like, that was ass. And I was like, I would go watch it and I'll be like, yeah, that was ass. But then I think about it like deeply. I'm like, actually, that wasn't ass. Actually, I really enjoyed it. It fulfilled the things that I was missing. And so I think randomly going into things and immersing yourself into art, it kind of lets you be an independent thinker a little bit more, and not so like a collective hive around the art that you're consuming, because everyone is going to react to art differently. It's very a subjective experience. It's an emotional experience, and some people are going to be like, that was really fun, and some people are gonna leave like, that was traumatic as hell and I did not like it, and the actor did this and the actress did this. And it's like, those contexts are important in some aspects, but not all the time. It actually prevents us from enjoying the art in the most intentional and the most grounded way that we can be enjoying it. This is sort of like a little bit of a breakthrough that I had in the last 2-3 years maybe, but I've been doing it for as long as I remember, maybe since I was a teenager. Journaling or keeping a memory of the feeling that you felt after consuming the art that you have, so that you have some sort of like an immediate reflection on it. Sometimes I would watch a thing, or I would read a thing, and I would have very drastic or charged reaction to it, whether that's positive or negative, and I would want to share it to the world. Like I would want to go on Twitter, I would want to go on Instagram, and I would want to share it, or I would want to make a YouTube video about it. And the more I think about it, it's like, why? That seems so, at least for me, that seems a little bit like you're looking for a confirmation bias of what you're looking for, and you're also creating a weird barrier for people that may want to enjoy it for the first time. So this is a very personal experience that I am having, or a personal reaction to this thing. So I have to distinguish between the personal reaction versus like, I just want to rant about it. Both of those things can be memory kept or journaled about. But what I've started doing is like, I started to journal and say like, oh, I really like this show and this is what brought up for me, or I hated the way this happened, or this actor did this, or like I hated this character, or something like that. I think that's very important, because a lot of the time we consume art so much. Like I go to museums a lot in the summer, for instance, or in the spring, and I don't even remember what I saw. And the reason is because of the overconcentration, the oversaturatedness, and the overload of content that we already consume. But we don't really see, going to a museum, seeing an exhibit versus reading a book or watching a show and reading a podcast. We're constantly consuming content. We're absorbing content. I was doing this media fast for about a week where I wasn't really consuming anything, right? And I felt a difference. Like I felt like almost like a very strong reaction about like not consuming something for a while, and fasting from that is actually really important for you to not feel so reactionary and dysregulated around how you would consume the thing. And so a lot of people, again, are not able to have the attention, and sometimes I don't either, the attention to even absorb the information, because they probably consumed like 3, 4, 5 hours of art that day, but they haven't really categorized it, compartmentalized it as art. They've kind of been like, oh, it was like a podcast in the background that I was listening to. That happens a lot. Being able to journal or memory keep also lets you think about it like in 5 years or 10 years. Remember when I watched Deadpool for the first time, I was in Nairobi and I was having a very strong reaction to it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And also the experience of being like in this theater in Nairobi. There was like a lot of strange things happening. There were like lions that escaped, only in Kenya, but like that were lions that escaped from a zoo that were like sort of in the city. So there was some like partial shutdown in the city, and I remember having an experience where I was like, wow, this is so strange that I would want to go see a movie that is popular in the US. I remember just like writing about it. I went home and I wrote about it, and I looked back at that. It's been about 7 years maybe, or 6 years, and I was reading back at it like a couple of months ago, and I was like, oh my god, like I remember exactly how vivid and detailed that day was, and I remember every emotion that I felt that day. And also I have a very positive association with the film, so there are stuff like that that kind of gives you like delayed joy as well. This is also something that sometimes I struggle with, because I be sharing everything. Talk to other people about the art you consume regularly. I think this is something that we don't often do as much, because again, that hyper niche specific thing. Like, let me tell you a story. I was in New York with my friend, and we were just at this random pizza place in Chelsea, and I made like a reference, and she was like, how did you know that? And I was like, oh, it's from this other thing. And she was like, no, like where is that from? And I told her it was like a specific YouTube series that I was watching. And I was like, nobody's watching. This is just my For You page. And she was like, wait, I know that guy. I know the web series. I know that show. Like, I know every episode. And I was like, what, you do? And the reason I was surprised was because she's not the type of person who consumes a lot of YouTube videos or a lot of films. So I was just like, oh, I should talk to people more. I should not assume what people consume. Because of specificity of what everyone consumes individually, we start to have assumptions about like, this is the type of thing you consume, this is the type of thing I consume. But at the end of the day, a lot of our For You pages and a lot of the books that we read and stuff, the things that are recommended to us kind of come from the same place. We are living very similar realities in the way that we interact with art. So being able to be curious about people and what they're consuming in different moods, emotional state, or even points of their lives is actually really important, and it keeps you from creating this weird prejudice about like who this person is and what they are able to consume, and creates like sort of like a much more like rounded relationship between the different people that are in your life. I think this is also the most controversial one, and I'm gonna say it, which is make your own stuff. This is something that I learned from a lot of artists, actually. It took me a really long time to say I'm an artist, I'm a filmmaker. I think publicly failing and getting rejection and not people instantly not falling in love with a thing is one of the things that prevents us from passively consuming. A lot of people don't even consider themselves as artists, and I don't think it has to be like we all have those ideas where we're watching something, I'm like, oh, that would be fun to do, and they're like, yeah, that's a crazy idea, I won't do it. Why not? Do the thing. You know, at first you could even keep it private, you could even keep it unlisted if it's a video that you're doing, or if it's a writing that you're doing, just do like the November writing months, like join those, or join like a writing workshop, or write on your journal consistently for 3-4 days and see how you feel. I think being able to also share that with other people, it helps me a lot with building my own confidence around my art and what I create. I used to be very, very ashamed of sharing my YouTube pages. Not just this YouTube page, but I have another YouTube page where I've had it for like probably since my early 20s, where I was so ashamed. One day, one of my friends who I studied abroad with, I didn't talk to her for like maybe 4 or 5 years. So I was like, oh yeah, like this is just a study abroad relationship. And she reached out to me out of nowhere one spring day. And she was like, wait, I saw you on a video about this thing that I watch. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? My first thing was like fear, like this fear. It took me a moment to be like, what's the worst that could happen? And I was like, yeah, that's me. And she was like, oh my God, I love this video. I can't believe you watched this too. Like, it's like a very niche show that a very specific part of the population that watches it. So it's also based on a book. So we were also both reading the book, and it reconnected us and actually fueled a relationship for both of us. She's one of my really good friends. I think a relationship that would have been disposed or has ended up being like a study abroad relationship became something more. I'm not saying like that is the outcome I'm wanting everyone to see, but making your own stuff and publicly failing and sometimes privately failing prevents a lot of us from consuming passively, because it also makes you pause and be like, okay, let me actually like stop watching so much YouTube videos and actually create some YouTube videos, or let me actually try to figure out how my camera works, or let me actually try to sit down and like write 2 paragraphs or something like that. Or I've really been wanting to get back into comic books or anime. Let me get back to it. Like, these are things that could happen from you wanting to create something that has nothing to do with fame, that has nothing to do with validations by other people, but for you to be intentionally consuming art in a way that feels fulfilling, in a way that feels like, you know, the point. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I really want to know if y'all have any curiosity around art that you've been thinking about. If so, put them in the link in the doobly-doo. And I want to hear all about it. I'll talk to you later. Bye.